This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning. I'm George Stephanopoulos. We are rejoining you again because President Obama is about to speak in the White House Rose Garden about the violence that broke out in Libya overnight. As we have said, 4 Americans killed, including the U.S. ambassador. It came when a group of armed and angry militants attacked the consulate there. They had guns. Appears to have had rockets. They set the consulate on fire. There were several Americans inside being guarded by Libyan security. And at the time right now, we do know that the ambassador and 3 other Americans, including an information officer, have been killed. It was all sparked by an anti-Muslim film produced by an Israeli living in California. That film also sparked protests and attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. President Obama has already put out a written statement this morning condemning the attacks, ordering increased security at American diplomatic posts around the world. Jake Tapper is at the White House right now.
Good morning. Every day, all across the world, American diplomats and civilians work tirelessly to advance the interests and values of our nation. Often, they are away from their families. Sometimes they brave great danger. Yesterday, 4 of these extraordinary Americans were killed in an attack on our diplomatic post in Benghazi. Among those killed was our ambassador, Chris Stevens, as well as Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith. We are still notifying the families of the others who were killed. And today, the American people stand united in holding the families of the 4 Americans in our thoughts and in our prayers. The United States condemns in the strongest terms this outrageous and shocking attack. We're working with the government of Libya to secure our diplomats. I've also directed my administration to increase our security at diplomatic posts around the world. And make no mistake, we will work with the Libyan government to bring to justice the killers who attacked our people. Since our founding, the United States has been a nation that respects all faiths. We reject all efforts to denigrate the religious beliefs of others. But there is absolutely no justification to this type of senseless violence. None. The world must stand together to unequivocally reject these brutal acts. Already, many Libyans have joined us in doing so, and this attack will not break the bonds between the United States and Libya. Libyan security personnel fought back against the attackers alongside Americans. Libyans helped some of our diplomats find safety, and they carried Ambassador Stevens' body to the hospital, where we tragically learned that he had died. It's especially tragic that Chris Stevens died in Benghazi because it is a city that he helped to save. At the height of the Libyan revolution, Chris led our diplomatic post in Benghazi. With characteristic skill, courage, and resolve, he built partnerships with Libyan revolutionaries and helped them as they planned to build a new Libya. When the Gaddafi regime came to an end, Chris was there to serve as our ambassador to the new Libya, and he worked tirelessly to support this young democracy, and I think both Secretary Clinton and I relied deeply on his knowledge of the situation on the ground there. He was a role model to all who worked with him and to the young diplomats who aspire to walk in his footsteps. Along with his colleagues, Chris died in a country that is still striving to emerge from the recent experience of war. Today, the loss of these 4 Americans is fresh, but our memories of them linger on. I have no doubt that their legacy will live on through the work that they did far from our shores and in the hearts of those who love them back home. Of course, yesterday was already a painful day for our nation as we marked the solemn memory of the 9/11 attacks. We mourned with the families who were lost on that day. I visited the graves of troops who made the ultimate sacrifice in Iraq and Afghanistan at the hallowed grounds of Arlington Cemetery and had the opportunity to say thank you and visit some of our wounded warriors at Walter Reed. And then last night, we learned the news of this attack in Benghazi. As Americans, let us never, ever forget that our freedom is only sustained because there are people who are willing to fight for it, to stand up for it, and in some cases lay down their lives for it. Our country is only as strong as the character of our people and the service of those, both civilian and military, who represent us around the globe. No acts of terror will ever shake the resolve of this great nation, alter that character, or eclipse the light of the values that we stand for. Today we mourn for more Americans who represent the very best of the United States of America. We will not waver in our commitment to see that justice is done for this terrible act, and make no mistake, justice will be done. But we also know that the lives these Americans led stand in stark contrast to those of their attackers. These 4 Americans stood up for freedom and human dignity. They should give every American great pride in the country that they served, and the hope that our flag represents to people around the globe who also yearn to live in freedom and with dignity. We grieve with their families, but let us carry on their memory, and let us continue their work of seeking a stronger America and a better world for all of our children. Thank you. May God bless the memory of those we lost, and may God bless the United States of America.
Was this an act of
President
war?
Obama with Secretary Clinton in the Rose Garden being asked if this was an act of war as he walks away. He is now heading to the State Department to express his condolences.
We will not waver in our commitment to see that justice is done for this terrible act in Benghazi. And make no mistake, justice will be done. That was the President of the United States. Remember the mantra, Mr. Chairman? Al-Qaeda's on the run. GM's alive. Osama bin Laden's dead. Al-Qaeda's on the run. When really they're standing at the front door of our facility in Benghazi, getting ready to murder our ambassador and burn it down. I'm not telling you how to do your job, but I'm going to ask you some questions. Can you tell me why Chris Stevens was in Benghazi the night that he was killed? Do you know why an ambassador asking for more security days and weeks before he was murdered and those requests went unheeded? Do you know why no assets were deployed during the siege? And do you know whether the president called any of our allies? Why was Susan Rice on the 5 Sunday talk shows? Do you know the origin of this mythology? That it was spawned as a spontaneous reaction to a video. So, Mr. Hicks, let's find out the truth. The president of Libya responded to the attack and labeled it an attack by Islamic extremists, possibly with terror links, correct?
Yes, sir.
So hours after our ambassador and 3 others are killed in Benghazi, the president of Libya says it was an attack with possible terror links, correct?
Yes, sir, that's what I recall.
Did the president of Libya ever mention a spontaneous protest related to a video?
No, sir.
When Ambassador Stevens talked to you, perhaps minutes before he died, as a dying declaration, what precisely did he say to you?
He said, Greg, we're under attack.
Would a highly decorated career diplomat have told you or Washington had there been a demonstration outside his facility that day?
Yes, sir, he would have.
Did he mention one word about a protest or a demonstration?
No, sir, he did not.
So fast forward, Mr. Hicks, to the Sunday talk shows and Ambassador Susan Rice. She blamed this attack on a video. In fact, she did it 5 different times. What was your reaction to that?
I was stunned. My jaw dropped, and I was embarrassed.
Did she talk to you before she went on the 5 Sunday talk shows?
No, sir.
You were the highest-ranking official in Libya at the time, correct?
Yes, sir.
And she did not bother to have a conversation with you before she went on national television?
No, sir.
So Ambassador Rice directly contradicts the evidence on the ground in Libya. She directly contradicts the president of Libya. She directly contradicts the last statement uttered by Ambassador Stevens. Mr. Hicks, who is Beth Jones?
Beth Jones is the Acting Assistant Secretary for Near Eastern Affairs at the State Department.
I want to read an excerpt from an email she sent and you were copied on it. And by the way, Mr. Chairman, for our colleagues who like to trumpet bipartisanship, this would be a wonderful opportunity to demonstrate it. Some of these emails, even though they're not classified, have not been released, Mr. Chairman, including the one that I'm going to read from. So for my colleagues who trumpet bipartisanship, this would be a wonderful time to prove it. This is from Ms. Jones to you, to counsel for Hillary Clinton, to Victoria Nuland, to Mr. Kennedy, near as I can tell, to almost everyone in the State Department, and I'm going to read from it. I spoke to the Libyan ambassador and emphasized the importance of Libyan leaders continuing to make strong statements. By the way, Mr. Hicks, this email was sent on September the 12th, the day after Benghazi, and several days before Ambassador Rice's television appearance. And I'll continue. When he said his government suspected that former Gaddafi regime elements carried out the attacks, I told him that the group that conducted the attacks, Ansar al-Sharia, is affiliated with Islamic terrorists. Let me say that again, Mr. Hicks. She told him, the State Department, on September the 12th, days before our ambassador went on national television, is telling the ambassador to Libya, the group that conducted the attacks, Ansar al-Sharia, is affiliated with Islamic terrorists. Mr. Hicks, I want to know two things. Number one, why in the world would Susan Rice go on 5 Sunday talk shows and perpetuate a demonstrably false narrative? And secondarily, what impact did it have on the ground in Benghazi, the fact that she contradicted the president of Libya?
As to the first question, I cannot provide an answer, but perhaps you should ask Ambassador Rice.
I would love the opportunity to do just that. Ms. Smith and Mr. Woods, I want to express on a personal level my gratitude and my sympathy to you for the loss of your sons, and to everyone that loved your sons and all the 4 victims of Benghazi. And the word closure is used all the time. In my experiences, it's only used by people who have never suffered the loss of a child, because there is no closure. I can't offer you closure. What I hope we can offer you is the truth, facts, justice, and let you do with that what you need to do as you walk down that road we call grief. I am asked about Benghazi, and in effect about your sons, more than any other issue. So the jury has not forgotten. Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Glenn Doherty, and Tyrone Woods served this country with courage and with honor. And they were killed under circumstances that most of us could never imagine. Terrorists pour through the front gate of an American facility, attacking people and property with machine guns, mortars, and fire. It is important that we remember how these 4 men died. It is equally important that we remember how these 4 men lived and why. They were more than 4 images on a television screen. They were husbands and fathers and sons and brothers and family and friends. They were Americans who believed in service and sacrifice. Many people speak wistfully of a better world, but do little about it. These 4 went out and actually tried to make it better, and it cost them their lives. So we know what they gave us. What do we owe them? Justice for those that killed them. We owe their families our everlasting gratitude, respect. We owe them and each other the truth. The truth about why we were in Libya. The truth about what we were doing in Libya. The truth about the escalating violence in Libya before we were attacked and these 4 men were killed. the truth about requests for additional security, the truth about requests for additional personnel, the truth about requests for additional equipment, the truth about where and why our military was positioned as it was on the anniversary of 9/11, the truth about what was happening and being discussed in Washington while our people were under attack, the truth about what led to the attacks, and the truth about what our government told the American people after the attacks. Why were there so many requests for more security personnel and equipment, and why were those requests denied in Washington? Why did the State Department, compound and facility, not even come close to meeting proper security specifications? What policies were we pursuing in Libya that required a physical presence in spite of the escalating violence? Who in Washington was aware of the escalating violence? What precautions, if any, were taken on the anniversary of 9/11? What happened in Washington after the first attack, and what was our response to that attack? What did the military do or not do? What did our leaders in Washington do or not do, and when? Why was the American public given such divergent accounts of what caused these attacks? And why is it so hard to get information from the very government these four men represented, served, and sacrificed for? Even after an accountability review board and a half-dozen congressional investigations, these and other questions still lingered. And these questions lingered because previous investigations were not thorough. These questions lingered because those previous investigations were narrow in scope and either incapable or unwilling to access the facts and evidence necessary to answer all relevant questions. So the House of Representatives, including some Democrats, I hasten to add, asked this committee to write the final definitive accounting of what happened in Benghazi. This committee is the first committee to review more than 50,000 pages of documents because we insisted that they be produced. This committee is the first committee to demand access to more eyewitnesses because serious investigations talk to as many eyewitnesses as possible. This committee is the first committee to thoroughly and individually interview scores of other witnesses, many of them for the first time. This committee is the first committee to review thousands of pages of documents from top State Department personnel. This committee is the first committee to demand access to relevant documents from the CIA, the FBI, the Department of Defense, and even the White House. This committee is the first committee to demand access to the emails to and from Ambassador Chris Stevens. How could an investigation possibly be considered serious without reviewing the emails of the person most knowledgeable about Libya? This committee is the first committee, the only committee, to uncover the fact that Secretary Clinton exclusively used personal email on her own personal server for official business and kept the public record, including emails about Benghazi and Libya, in her own custody and control for almost 2 years after she left office. You will hear a lot today about the Accountability Review Board. Secretary Clinton has mentioned it more than 70 times in her previous testimony before Congress. But when you hear about the ARB, you should also know the State Department leadership handpicked the members of the ARB. The ARB never interviewed Secretary Clinton. The ARB never reviewed her emails. And Secretary Clinton's top advisor was allowed to review and suggest changes to the ARB before the public ever saw it. There's no transcript of ARB interviews, so it's impossible to know whether all relevant questions were asked and answered. And because there's no transcript, it is also impossible to cite the ARB interviews with any particularity at all. That is not independent. That is not accountability. That is not a serious investigation. If those previous congressional investigations were really serious and thorough, how did they miss Ambassador Stevens' emails? If those previous investigations were serious and thorough, how did they miss Secretary Clinton's emails? If those congressional investigations really were serious and thorough, why did they fail to interview dozens of key State Department witnesses, including agents on the ground who experienced the attacks firsthand? Just last month, 3 years after Benghazi, top aides finally returned documents to the State Department. A month ago, this committee received 1,500 new pages of Secretary Clinton's emails related to Libya and Benghazi, 3 years after the attacks. Now, a little over 2 weeks ago, this committee received nearly 1,400 pages of Ambassador Stevens' emails, 3 years after the attacks. It is impossible to conduct a serious, fact-centric investigation without access to the documents from the former Secretary of State, the ambassador who knew more about Libya than anyone else, and testimony from witnesses who survived the attacks. Madam Secretary, I understand there are people, frankly, in both parties who have suggested that this investigation is about you. Let me assure you it is not, and let me assure you why it is not. This investigation is about 4 people who were killed representing our country on foreign soil. It is about what happened before, during, and after the attacks that killed them. It is about what this country owes to those who risk their lives to serve it. And it is about the fundamental obligation of government to tell the truth, always, to the people that it purports to represent. Madam Secretary, not a single member of this committee signed up to investigate you or your email. We signed up to investigate and therefore honor the lives of 4 people that we sent into a dangerous country to represent us, and to do everything we can to prevent it from happening to others. Our committee has interviewed 100 witnesses. Not a single one of them has been named Clinton until today. You were the Secretary of State for this country at all relevant times. So of course the committee is going to want to talk to you. You are an important witness. You are one important witness among 100 important witnesses. And I do understand you wanted to come sooner than today, so let me be clear why that did not happen. You had an unusual email arrangement, which meant the State Department could not produce your emails to us. You made exclusive use of personal email and a personal server. And when you left the State Department, you kept the public record to yourself for almost 2 years. And it was you and your attorneys who decided what to return and what to delete. Those decisions were your decisions, not our decisions. It was only in March of this year we learned of this email arrangement. And since we learned of this email arrangement, we have interviewed dozens of witnesses, only one of whom was solely related to your email arrangement. And that was the shortest interview of all, because that witness invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against incrimination. Making sure the public record is complete is what serious investigations do, so it was important and remains important that this committee have access to all of Ambassador Stevens' emails, the emails of other senior leaders and witnesses, and it is important to gain access to all of your emails, Madam Secretary. Your emails are no less or no more important than the emails of anyone else. It just took us a little bit longer to get them, and it garnered a little more attention in the process. I want you to take note during this hearing how many times congressional Democrats call on this administration to make long-awaited documents available to us. They won't. Take note of how many witnesses congressional Democrats ask us to schedule for interview. They won't. We would be much closer to finding out what happened and writing the final definitive report if Democrats on this committee had helped us just a little bit pursue the facts. But if the Democrats on this committee had their way, dozens of witnesses never would have been interviewed. Your public record would still be private. Thousands of documents never would have been accessed. And we wouldn't have the emails of our own ambassador. That may be smart politics, but it is a lousy way to run a serious investigation. Our country is strong enough to handle the truth, and our fellow citizens expect us to pursue the truth wherever the facts take us. So this committee is going to do what we pledged to do and what should have been done, frankly, a long time ago, which is interview all relevant witnesses, examine all relevant evidence, and access all relevant documents. And we're going to pursue the truth in a manner worthy of the memory of the 4 people who lost their lives and worthy of the respect of our fellow citizens. And we are going to write that final definitive accounting of what happened in Benghazi. And we would like to do it with your help and the help of our Democrat colleagues, but make no mistake, we are going to do it nonetheless. Because understanding what happened in Benghazi goes to the heart of who we are as a country and the promises we make to those that we send into harm's way. They deserve the truth. They deserve the whole truth. They deserve nothing but the truth. The people we work for deserve the truth. The friends and family of the 4 who lost their lives deserve the truth. We're going to find the truth because there is no statute of limitations on the truth. With that, I would recognize my friend from Maryland.
The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. The truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Madam Secretary, I want to thank you very much for being here today to testify before Congress on this very important issue. This is your 3rd time. This week, our chairman, Mr. Gowdy, was interviewed in a lengthy media profile. During his interview, he complained that he was, and I quote, he has an impossible job. That's what the chairman said, impossible job. He said, is it impossible to conduct a serious, fact-centric investigation in such a, quote, political environment? I have great respect for the chairman, but on this score, he is absolutely wrong. In fact, it has been done by his own Republican colleagues in the House on this very issue, Benghazi. The Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee conducted an extensive, bipartisan, 2-year investigation and issued a detailed report. The Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Homeland Security Committee also conducted a bipartisan investigation. Those bipartisan efforts respected and honored the memories of the 4 brave Americans who gave their lives in Benghazi. Ambassador Chris Stevens, Sean Smith, Tyrone Woods, and Glenn Doherty. The problem is that the Republican caucus did not like the answers they got from those investigations, so they set up this select committee with no rules, no deadline, and an unlimited budget. And they set them loose, Madam Secretary, because you're running for president. Clearly, it is possible to conduct a serious bipartisan investigation. What is impossible is for any reasonable person to continue denying that Republicans are squandering millions of taxpayer dollars on this abusive effort to derail Secretary Clinton's presidential campaign.
They stood their post. The least we can do is stand this meager post that we've been assigned and demand that this administration speak the truth to the people it's supposed to serve. This was never about a video. It was never spontaneous. This is terror. And I want to know why we were lied to. So if anyone wants to know what difference does it make, if anyone wants to ask what difference does it make, it always matters whether or not you can trust your government. And to the families, we're going to find out what happened in Benghazi, and I don't give a damn whose career is impacted. We're going to find out what happened.
John. Jay, you told us that the only changes that were made were stylistic. Is it a stylistic change to take out all references to previous terror threats in Benghazi?
Well, I appreciate the question again, and I think that what I was referring to was the talking points that the CIA drafted and sent around, to which one change was made. And I accept that stylistic may not precisely describe a change of one word to another.
Jay, this was not a change of one word.
No, I'm just...
These underwent extensive changes after they were written by the CIA. Sure. These were concerns that were raised by the State Department that the White House directed the interagency process to use in making these talking points.
Well, I think
the CIA original version included references to Al-Qaeda, references to Ansar al-Islam. The original CIA version included extensive discussion of the previous threats of terrorist attacks in Benghazi. Those were taken out after the CIA wrote its initial draft.
And then the CIA wrote another draft.
Based on input from the State Department.
Well, but here's what I've been saying,
John. Do you deny that?
No, John, what I'm saying is, and I've answered this question several times now, but I'm happy to answer it again if you let me answer it, and that is that there was an interagency process, which is always the case, because a lot of agencies have a stake in a matter like this. The investigative agency, the CIA, the intelligence agencies, the State Department in this case, the national security staff. And everybody provided information and comment, and then on Saturday morning the CIA said, we're going to take a crack at drafting these points based on what we know. And the things that you're talking about, again, don't go to the fundamental issue here, which was what could be said concretely about what the intelligence community knew to be true. Not that some people thought it was Ansar al-Sharia. Some people thought it was other al-Qaeda affiliates or other Libyan extremists. So we knew it was extremists, or we believed we knew that extremists had participated. There was also the belief from the beginning by the intelligence community in these points that there had been protests out of which the attack occurred, protests in response to the demonstrations that were in Cairo at our embassy that were in response to that video. That turned out not to be the case, but it demonstrates the fluidity of the information, the fact that it was hard and continues to be hard in an investigation to know concretely, especially in the first days afterwards, what happened. And that's why we were so careful to say, here's what we know, or we believe we know. And every time we said that, we fully expect this information to change as we learn more. And it did. And we provided it. And again, the whole effort here by Republicans to find some hidden mystery comes to nothing because the president called it an act of terror. The ambassador to the United Nations, that very Sunday that has caused Republicans so much concern, talked about the possible involvement of Al-Qaeda and Ansar al-Sharia. All of this is a distraction from the key issues. A diplomatic post was attacked by individuals in Libya, in Benghazi. 4 Americans lost their lives. From the beginning, the president has committed all the resources of this administration, of this government, to finding out who was responsible and to bringing them to justice. He also very clearly, together with the Secretary of State, said we need to make sure that we find out what went wrong, what problems there were with security that allowed this to happen, to hold people accountable and to make the necessary changes so that it doesn't happen again. And that process happened, was stood up by the Secretary of State. It was a process led by 2 of the most experienced and widely regarded figures in national security in Washington, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Admiral Mullen, and Ambassador Tom Pickering, nonpartisan, serving both parties for different administrations. They conducted an extensive review of this. They've said they had access to all the information they needed. They had access to all the people they needed to talk to. And they produced an unsparing report with a series of very critical observations and very serious recommendations, every single one of which the State Department has adopted. So let me let some others. Last one, yeah.
When you said what you said, did you know that this had gone through 12 versions and that there had been extensive changes made? Were you aware of that at the time?
John, there is always a deliberative process. There is always input by agencies. And I knew that. And what I also knew was that the CIA on Saturday morning said, we're going to draft these points. They drafted those points, and those points were delivered virtually unchanged, with the exception of the one change I mentioned, to members of Congress and to the administration for use.
Can you clarify the point? Why were you holding back this information? Why was this email not turned over to the Congress? Why was it not released when you released all the other emails? This is directly relevant. Why did you hold it back?
John, again.
Why did it take a court case for you to release this email?
John, I can say it again and again, and I know you can keep asking again and again. This document was not about Benghazi.
It was her prep for the Sunday
It wasn't her only prep, John. She relied on for her answers on Benghazi on the document prepared by the CIA, as did members of Congress. We, the White House rather, and others involved in her prep, said when it comes to Benghazi, there's been a document prepared by the IC so that everybody is working off the same information, Republicans in Congress, Democrats in Congress, administration officials. This is what we know and what we are able to say about Benghazi at this time, and that's what she got. On all these other questions, as is the case for every Sunday, when the Treasury Secretary goes out, when the Deputy National Security Advisor goes out, when other administration officials go out, documents are prepared that anticipate questions from the press and provide answers based on our policy and our best understanding of what's happening at the time. That's standard operating procedure. And if you look at the document in question here, it is not about Benghazi, it is about the protests around the Muslim world outside of U.S. embassies and what we know about them and what we should say about them based on our policies.
Trey Gowdy joins us. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well. Ambassador Rice, now National Security Advisor, of course, says that was the best information available when she went on those talk shows in September of 2012. Is that true?
No, there is no evidence to support that false narrative of a video, not a scintilla of evidence. All of the evidence pointed exactly to what she claimed it wasn't, a pre-planned, coordinated attack. So she was fabulously wrong when she said it the first time, and stunningly arrogant in her refusal to express any regret for lying to our fellow citizens. Greta, I just listened to the clip. I get tougher questions in the Bojangles drive-thru than he asked her. There's no regret about lying to your fellow citizens. No regret about the fact that in 18 months, not a single solitary person's been brought to justice. No regret for misleading the families and the loved ones of those 4 murdered Americans. I can certainly help her if she is struggling to come up with an area of regret. Who did she talk to before she went on the Sunday talk shows? Did she call Hillary Clinton? Did she call Gregory Hicks in Libya? Did she do any due diligence at all?
Why do you think that she said that on that day? I mean, she says it was the best information. You say that that's not true. What was the motive? I still don't get the motive for coming up with the silly video story. What was the point of that one?
Well, I think the most plausible explanation is we can either tell the truth, which undercuts the narrative that the president's been engaged in during the campaign. Remember, we were in the midst of a campaign. Al-Qaeda's on the run and Osama bin Laden is dead. Well, apparently Al-Qaeda was not on the run. They were at the front door of our facility in Benghazi getting ready to kill our ambassador and burn it down. So she can either tell the truth or she can blame it on a video for which there was no evidence whatsoever, and she opted to protect her career and parrot the talking points that were provided her by the White House.
You know what I regret is that, and this is what I would like to do, is I believe that in Washington, when you don't want to say something, you just stamp it classified, and then nobody gets to see it for 10, 20, 30, 50 years, whatever. I would like a really, fair analysis about whether documents associated with this in the possession of the administration should be classified, or whether the American people ought to be able to see them. I think there's a gross overclassification in this country, and I would bet that a lot of those documents would give us a lot of straight information on what went down.
Well, you're right. A lot of the classified documents are classified to protect political careers, not to protect national interests. But I think it also bears on another point. There are 4 committees that have been looking into this for 18 months. And to my knowledge, not a single one has had the opportunity to ask the follow-up questions that David Gregory failed to ask on Sunday. It may be time to put our efforts together with a select committee with subpoena power, because as you know, I can't subpoena anyone. I can't subpoena the greeter at Walmart. I have no subpoena power. the committee chairman and the speaker do. And I'm about ready to ask Ms. Rice some questions under oath, not David Gregory type questions about what's your favorite color, but real serious questions about why you had so little intellectual curiosity as to question the talking points that you were asked to parrot. Did you ask anybody to prove to you that this was a video? Or did you just go out and parrot it?
Well, if the speaker does and the chairman does issue a subpoena, make sure it also includes one for documents and try to get all those documents that are now classified, because I think that they will either corroborate or make somebody out to be, telling even bigger fibs. But anyway, Congressman, always nice to see you, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Hicks later told Fox News that Stevens had to be in Benghazi that September 11th because of a budget deadline at the end of that month, Brett.
That's the thing. Secretary Clinton said today there was a lot of confusion about the attack.
Well, the mortar strike on the CIA annex is really the smoking gun evidence that it was premeditated terrorism. 3 mortars struck the CIA in under 90 seconds, fired from more than a half-mile away. It was a professional hit that required training and planning. It killed former Navy SEALs Ty Woods and Glenn Doherty, and it nearly blew off the leg of a diplomatic security agent. And today, Mrs. Clinton's emails show that she didn't believe herself that a video was responsible for this terrorist attack, Brett.
All right, Catherine, thank you.
A Fox News alert. Breaking news now on the deadly terror attack on the U.S. consulate in Libya. Fox News sources telling us CIA officers on the ground in Benghazi during the attack sent requests for help but were denied. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is live at the Pentagon with more on this. Jennifer.
Hi, John. Well, sources who were on the ground in Benghazi during the attack tell Fox News that, in fact, there were 3 separate requests to aid not only the attack that was occurring at the consulate and to help with that attack, but also requests for outside help, outside military to help once there were gunfires and firefights at the CIA annex. Those requests, we're told, came from higher headquarters. They were told to stand down. There were, as you know, Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods, the former Navy SEALs, were over at the CIA annex at about 9:40 p.m. when the first shots were heard at the consulate where the ambassador and his team were taking fire. I'm told that they radioed to their higher headquarters that they wanted permission to go and help the ambassador, to help the ambassador's teams. At that time, they were told by their higher-ups to, quote, stand down. They waited approximately an hour. They requested again to send Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods, and other members of that team to help out at the consulate. They were again, for a second time, told to stand down. They ignored those orders. They made their way over to the consulate against orders. They helped rescue those who had survived at the consulate. They could not find the ambassador. They made their way back to the CIA annex about 1 mile away at midnight. That is approximately, the firing had started at 9:40 p.m., so that is approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes later. They get back to the CIA annex. They begin taking fire almost immediately. 4 mortars are fired at the compound. During that time, there was no problem with communications, I'm told from sources on the ground. They were in constant radio contact with higher headquarters. They were calling for military support, air support. I've also learned from separate sources that there was at least one special operations unit, most likely Delta Force, that was waiting on standby at Sigonella Air Base, about 480 miles from Benghazi. The firing had started at 9:40 p.m., so that is approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes later. They get back to the CIA annex. They begin taking fire almost immediately. 4 mortars are fired at the compound. During that time, there was no problem with communications, I'm told from sources on the ground. They were in constant radio contact with higher headquarters. They were calling for military support, air support. I've also learned from separate sources that there was at least one special operations unit, most likely Delta Force, that was waiting on standby at Sigonella Air Base, about 480 miles from Benghazi. 3 Libyan attackers, and were forced to hand them over to the Libyan February 17th forces that came to help at the annex at approximately 4 in the morning. They handed those 3 Libyans over. It's not clear from U.S. officials what happened to those Libyans and whether those Libyan attackers were in fact released in the end by the Libyans. But this is somewhat explosive information that 3 requests were denied from higher headquarters to not only help the ambassador and his team at the consulate, but also to send in outside military help that could have helped in this ongoing firefight that went on for 6 hours and 20 minutes. A final point, John, we have confirmed that there were 2 surveillance drones sent over Benghazi. One of them was sent into position. It was already in position over Libya at the time, over eastern Libya. It was positioned shortly after the firing began. It had to be replaced by a second drone later in the evening. So there was always one drone up above sending real-time video back to computers that could be accessed at any of the agencies here in Washington. Anyone with a clearance at CIA, Pentagon, the White House Situation Room, or at the State Department could be tapping into that real-time video from the drones up above Benghazi on that night of September 11th and 12th. John?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon with some explosive information there. And so Doherty and Woods, who gave their lives in this attack, tried to rescue the others. In fact, did rescue the others against orders, you're saying. And this thing could have been a lot worse had they not done so. It's just incredible, and so many questions left to answer. Thank you, Jennifer.
And John, one final point. Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods were killed at 4 a.m. by a mortar shell. That is 6 hours and 20 minutes after the fighting at the consulate began. Yeah. My source also tells me that one of the team was on the roof with a laser pointer with eyes on the mortar attack team, the Libyan mortar, the people who were shelling. That laser could have helped guide in any Spectre gunship or any other form of military help if it had been sent from Sigonella.
Or an armed drone even. Jennifer Griffin, again, we'll get back to you later. Thank you so much.
You think they're losing heart?
Everyone over here. Find me every airbase in the area that can reach us.
Find me any quick response teams, any Navy carrier battle groups in the vicinity. Now.
I hear they have a U.S. SIF team in Croatia.
That's a 2-hour flight.
Sigonella, Aviano, Benghazi. How far is Aviano?
700 miles.
It's an F-16, 365 days, 24/7. It's a quick response base.
Or bring it in from Sigonella. It's a fucking paddle jump from Italy to here.
It's 20 minutes.
I am not requesting firepower. All I want is that you give these assholes outside our gate a low, loud, fuck you flyover. My authority? My authority is that if you don't send, Americans are going to die. Including the one talking to you right now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, for almost a year, there was an escalating pattern of violence directed towards the United States and other Western targets in Libya. Attacks on the consulate in Benghazi, attacks and assassination attempts on the British ambassador, attacks on the International Red Cross, attacks on courthouses, judges assassinated, culminating on September the 11th in the murder of 4 Americans, including our ambassador to Libya. Before those 4 murders, Mr. Chairman, just a few weeks before that, our embassy in Libya said this to the Department of State: the security condition in Libya remains unpredictable, volatile, and violent. So, Mr. Chairman, despite what would appear to any reasonably objective observer as an escalating pattern of violence, including sophistication, coordination, and management, this administration blamed the murder of our ambassador and 3 others on a video. Don't take my word for it, Mr. Chairman. Let's look at what Ambassador Rice herself said. Our current assessment is that what happened in Benghazi was, quote, in fact, initially a spontaneous reaction. I don't know what the phrase in fact means in diplomatic legalese. I can tell you what it means in a courtroom, Mr. Chairman. It means it's a fact. And she went on national television and she said, not as this ambassador has said, that I'm not going to speculate, that I've got to get all the information. She said, in fact, This was a spontaneous reaction to what had just transpired hours before in Cairo, almost a copycat of the demonstrations against our facility in Cairo, which were prompted, of course, Mr. Chairman, by a video, is what she said. And then she proceeds to say the attack was spontaneous. I can think of few things, Mr. Chairman, more antithetical to spontaneity than a 12-month-long prologue of violence in Libya. And then she said she relied solely and squarely on the information the intelligence community provided. Mr. Chairman, I would like to have another hearing where we can ask Ambassador Rice under oath, who told you what when? You're going to blame the intelligence committee? You come before this committee and you tell us who told you it was a video. Who in the intelligence community said it? Who in the diplomatic community blamed this on a video? And then we move to Jay Carney, who's the spokesperson for the leader of the free world. This is what he said, Mr. Chairman. I'm saying based on information that our initial information that includes all information, we saw no evidence to back up claims by others that this was a pre-planned or premeditated attack. What we saw was evidence that it was sparked by the reaction to this video. And that is what we know thus far based on evidence, concrete evidence, close quote. Mr. Chairman, you know that in former life, I spent a little time in the courtroom. So when I hear the phrase concrete evidence, it means something to me. That's even stronger language than simply saying something is in fact. So 2 representatives of this administration gave demonstrably false statements, not just to us, but to our fellow citizens on national television. Now, is the explanation for those demonstrably false statements, as my colleague from Florida just asked, was it negligence? Was it just a reckless disregard for the truth? Or was it more nefarious than that? Mr. Chairman, the American people are reasonable. People understand investigations take time. People don't expect you to speculate until you have all the facts. What they will not forgive, Mr. Chairman, is being misled. We want our questions answered, and I want them answered by the people that went out before the American people and sought to mislead them by blaming this on a video when there is no evidence, concrete or otherwise, to support the assertions made by this administration. Mr. Chairman, I just had a conversation with Jason Chaffetz out back, and I hope he doesn't mind me saying this. He still gets emotional talking about what he saw in Libya. There were 4 brave Americans who died under circumstances that we can scarcely fathom. The terror, the fear, the anarchy of being killed in that fashion. They did what their country asked them to do. They stood post under dangerous circumstances even after requests for security were denied. They stood their post. The least we can do is stand this meager post that we've been assigned and demand that this administration speak the truth to the people it's supposed to serve. This was never about a video. It was never spontaneous. This is terror. And I want to know why we were lied to. And I yield back.
The United States military, as I've said, is not and frankly should not be a 911 service.
There's some places on the planet where we have some gaps, and I think North Africa is probably one of them.
To Congressman Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, case closed.
The gentleman, the chair would now recognize the gentlelady from Indiana, Ms. Brooks.
Good morning, Secretary Clinton. Morning. Thank you for being here today. In drawing on what you just said, that very few, but no requests for Benghazi came to your attention, I'd like to show you something. This pile represents the emails that you sent or received about Libya in 2011, from February through December of 2011. This pile represents the emails you sent or received from early 2012 until the day of the attack. There are 795 emails in this pile. We've counted them. There are 67 emails in this pile in 2012. And I'm troubled by what I see here. And so my questions relate to these piles. In this pile in 2011, I see daily updates, sometimes hourly updates from your staff about Benghazi and Chris Stevens. When I look at this pile in 2012, I only see a handful of emails to you from your senior staff about Benghazi, and I have several questions for you about this disparity, because we know from talking to your senior advisors that they knew, and many of them are here today, seated behind you, they knew to send you important information, issues that were of importance to you, and I can only conclude by your own records that there was a lack of interest in Libya in 2012.
You had an unusual email arrangement, which meant the State Department could not produce your emails to us. You made exclusive use of personal email and a personal server. And when you left the State Department, you kept the public record to yourself for almost 2 years. And it was you and your attorneys who decided what to return and what to delete. Those decisions were your decisions, not our decisions. It was only in March of this year we learned of this email arrangement. And since we learned of this email arrangement, we have interviewed dozens of witnesses, only one of whom was solely related to your email arrangement. And that was the shortest interview of all, because that witness invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against incrimination.
Sure. Nearly 11 months after the Benghazi attacks and after President Obama stood in the front of the flag-draped coffins of 4 murdered Americans and vowed to bring their killers to justice, not one suspect is under arrest. Now, in a letter being drafted to the new director of the FBI, 8 Republican lawmakers are demanding aggressive steps to find the terrorist. The draft of the letter reads, quote, "It has been more than 10 months since the attacks. We appear to be no closer to knowing who was responsible today than we were in the early weeks following the attack. This is simply unacceptable." Earlier, I spoke to New Hampshire Senator Kelly Ayotte, a member of the Armed Services Committee and one of the lawmakers signing on to that letter. I asked her where we are right now in this FBI investigation.
That's the real question, because recently CNN actually was able to interview the head of Ansar al-Sharia, which is the terrorist group that claimed responsibility for the attacks on our consulate shortly after they occurred. And guess what? No one from the FBI had talked to him. No one from the Libyan authorities had talked to him. There are literally people running around Libya who have responsibility for having committed these attacks or knowledge of it, and apparently our FBI is not speaking to them. So where we are is totally unacceptable, as you've described it and what we've said in our letter, and we need answers. And with the new FBI director coming in, we expect to get answers to understand what is the FBI pursuing to hold those people who committed these horrific terrorist acts accountable.
What possible explanation can you imagine for why the FBI has not spoken to these key players?
I don't think there's any explanation that could be possible. I mean, it's just mind-boggling to me that the head of Ansar al-Sharia could be interviewed by a media organization and that the FBI hasn't spoken to him, nor have Libyan authorities. And the victims of these families, they deserve answers and justice. And what's also troubling, if you recall, Shannon, the president stood up during the presidential campaign and said that we're going to hunt these people down who committed these terrorist acts wherever they are, and that we're going to, if you mess with Americans, we're going to mess with you, and nothing has happened. So I think that this needs to be pursued, and for him obviously to refer to this as a phony scandal really is so troubling and disappointing in light of the fact that 4 brave Americans were murdered. So FBI, where have you been on this? I mean, this is basic investigation 101 in talking to the individuals on the ground in Libya.
Oh, okay. Now we know. You wanted to arrive on your chariot and announce the establishment of a permanent mission in a normalized Libya. Normalized? When you last visited Libya, you had the Defense Department pre-position assets off the Libyan coast in case you needed rescue. How could you? And then you swear under oath just back from weeks abroad, logging all those miles, recovering from the flu, the fall, the concussion, and the blood clot. You testify you didn't know a thing about your friend the ambassador's request for more security.
Any of the requests, any of the cables having to do with security did not come to my attention.
Now, Hillary, I know you were busy that night calling the president of Tunisia when all the action was in Libya. But you can't deny requests for more security in Benghazi and then blame the very people who asked for it. You can't have it both ways. And you want us to believe that you and the president are going to get the facts and get justice? You can't even get to the FBI, to the crime scene, for 3 weeks. And by the way, the FBI guys, they carry guns, don't they? If it takes them 3 weeks because it wasn't safe in Benghazi, how the hell is it safe enough for you to keep our civilian diplomats there? And what to do? Find some guys with impeccable reputations, beholden to your husband Bill, and ambassador named Pickering, an admiral named Mullen. Have them investigate and make sure they don't ask you any questions, or talk to the guy in charge of the emergency response. And Pickering, he's perfect. He apparently believes America is already full of Islamophobes. And while you're at it, Hillary, why not throw the president of Libya under the bus too? The man who traveled to Benghazi at great personal risk, confirming almost immediately what you already knew, that it was a terror attack, and you basically call him a liar or clueless to the rest of the world. And how about your take on our money? You take it and buy an advertisement to apologize to the Arab world about a video that has nothing to do with Benghazi while they burn us in effigy. That'll keep the lie going too. But they say we're obsessed with Benghazi. The New York Times says that our Benghazi obsession is all about hysterical allegations of crimes equal to Watergate. Really? My memory may not be all that great, but nobody died at Watergate, and no one was left on the battlefield. Our Congress, though, they're good. They'll get to the truth.
I find it truly disturbing and very unfortunate that when Americans come under attack, the first thing some did in this country was attack Americans, attack the military, attack the president, attack the State Department, attack the former senator from the great state of New York, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton.
You're kidding, right?
We have the best military in the world. But even with all of their technological advances, they could not get there in time.
Now, this guy hasn't even heard the testimony, and he's already accusing the man who has the most to lose, his own life, and who was actually on the ground and in the battle, of lying. And it gets worse.
Death is a part of life.
What difference at this point does it make?
It's as if they're saying, enough with the dead and on with the living, on to my next election. And remember this one?
The White House and State Department have made clear that the single adjustment that was made to those talking points by either of these two institutions were changing the word consulate to diplomatic facility because consulate was inaccurate.
Today we know that was a bold-faced lie. There were 12 deletions of references to terrorism at the instruction of the White House and the State Department. Hillary's henchwoman, that temple of veracity, Victoria Nuland, actually tells the CIA to remove any reference to the prior Benghazi security warnings because it could be used against Hillary. But my favorite, Leon Panetta. There just wasn't enough time. Listen to this one from 7 months ago.
A Monday morning quarterbacking going on here. Basic principle is that you don't deploy forces into harm's way without knowing what's going on, without having some real-time information.
The firing had started at 9:40 p.m., so that is approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes later. They get back to the CIA annex. They begin taking fire almost immediately. 4 mortars are fired at the compound. During that time, there was no problem with communications, I'm told from sources on the ground. They were in constant radio contact with higher headquarters. They were calling for military support, air support. I've also learned from separate sources that there was at least one special operations unit, most likely Delta Force, that was waiting on standby at Sigonella Air Base, about 480 miles from Benghazi. A final point, John, we have confirmed that there were 2 surveillance drones sent over Benghazi. One of them was sent into position. It was already in position over Libya at the time, over eastern Libya. It was positioned shortly after the firing began. It had to be replaced by a second drone later in the evening. So there was always one drone up above sending real-time video back to computers that could be accessed at any of the agencies here in Washington. Anyone with a clearance at CIA, Pentagon, the White House Situation Room, or at the State Department could be tapping into that real-time video from the drones up above Benghazi on that night of September 11th and 12th. John?
Jennifer Griffin at the Pentagon with some explosive information there. And so Doherty and Woods, who gave their lives in this attack, tried to rescue the others. In fact, did rescue the others against orders, you're saying. And this thing could have been a lot worse had they not done so. It's just incredible, and so many questions left to answer. Thank you, Jennifer.
And John, one final point. Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods were killed at 4 a.m. by a mortar shell. That is 6 hours and 20 minutes after the fighting at the consulate began. Yeah. My source also tells me that one of the team was on the roof with a laser pointer with eyes on the mortar attack team, the Libyan mortar, the people who were shelling. That laser could have helped guide in any Spectre gunship or any other form of military help if it had been sent from Sigonella.
Or an armed drone even. Jennifer Griffin, again, we'll get back to you later. Thank you so much.
There wasn't enough time? How did you know the fight wouldn't last 24 or 48 hours or more? In which case you could have gotten rescuers there. You could have saved Americans, but you didn't even start the process because you had no intention of saving those lives. You should be ashamed of yourself. Yes, Wednesday was a sad day for me personally, for the families of those killed, and for any American who believes as I do that America is the citadel of honor and freedom. This past week, the dreams that I had as a little girl in that small town were shattered.
At 6 p.m., now midnight in Benghazi, a series of urgent Pentagon meetings. 2 military units based in Spain, one on a training mission in Croatia, and another based at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, were told to get ready. Quick orders, but no quick options. And the bodies of 4 dead Americans on a transport plane to Germany.
The United States military, as I've said, is not and frankly should not be a 911 service.
There's some places on the planet where we have some gaps, and I think North Africa is probably one of them.
To Congressman Adam Smith, the top Democrat on the House Armed Services Committee, case closed. The evidence was overwhelming. Attacks that convinced the British, the Red Cross, and the United Nations to leave Benghazi. 2 prior attacks on the U.S. mission, an IED thrown over the fence by former security guards in April, and another IED in June that blew a huge hole in a compound gate. And detailed warnings, CNN is told, in 4,000 classified cables, including updates on new al-Qaeda training camps near Benghazi.
How come that didn't rise to the level where somebody said, you know, we just can't operate in this environment? It was a death trap.
The official administration review found the security arrangements grossly inadequate and spread the blame across the State Department bureaucracy.
Senator, I want to make clear that no one in the State Department, the intelligence community, any other agency ever recommended that we close Benghazi.
Ed Henry. want to take Chuck's lead and just ask a very small follow-up, which is whether you feel you have a mandate, not just on taxes, but on a range of issues because of your decisive victory. But I want to stay on Benghazi based on what John asked, because you said if they want to come after me, come after me. I wanted to ask about the families of these 4 Americans who were killed. Sean Smith's father, Ray, said he believes his son basically called 911 for help, and they didn't get it. And I know you've said you grieve for these 4 Americans, that it's being investigated, but the families have been waiting for more than 2 months. So I would like for you to address the families if you can. On 9/11, as Commander-in-Chief, did you issue any orders to try to protect their lives?
Ed, I'll address the families not through the press. I'll address the families directly, as I already have. And we will provide all the information that is available about what happened on that day. That's what the investigation's for. But as I said repeatedly, if people don't think that we did everything we can to make sure that we saved the lives of folks who I sent there and who were carrying out missions on behalf of the United States, then you don't know how our Defense Department thinks, or our State Department thinks, or our CIA thinks. Their number one priority is obviously to protect American lives. That's what our job is. Now, Ed, I will put forward every bit of information that we have. I can tell you that immediately upon finding out that our folks were in danger, that my orders to my national security team were do whatever we need to do to make sure they're safe. And that's the same order that I would give any time that I see Americans are in danger, whether they're civilian or military, because that's our number one priority.
Lies, deceit, and cover-ups. That's the Obama administration's response to the terrorist attack that killed 4 Americans. And now parents of the victims are demanding the truth from Obama.
Well, I know there was a cover-up. I had to get my information from outside sources because the government would not tell me. And Hillary said that, what difference does it make? It makes one big difference to me. My son was killed.
4 men with careers protecting American security were murdered, and Barack Obama doesn't even act concerned.
His eyes were looking over my shoulder like he could not look me in the eye. And it was not a sincere, I'm really sorry, that your son died.
Enough of the lies. Enough of the cover-ups. It's time to hold Barack Obama accountable.
Unknowns are advancing toward subject compound, moving from south-southeast over open ground. No tags or colors, asymmetrical movements, no weapons observed.
Cyclops pushing in at 140.
State, we're being surrounded by tangos right now.
Chief, it's just starting to get real.
Oz, we got 7 tangos by the pillars.
Got him. Let him come. Let him come. Let him come.
Chief, are we cleared hot to shoot? Chief, I repeat, are we cleared hot to shoot?
See a weapon. Shooter's discretion.
Everybody hold.
You do not fucking fire.
Until I give the word.
I ain't shooting no kids, Boone. All right, guys, eyes open. I'm gonna paint these guys with the infrared so we're all on the same page. Everybody got this guy?
Roger. Yeah, I got him.
This guy?
Got him. Got him.
This guy?
Got him.
Got him. How about that guy?
3. Bicycle.
Look at these guys. It's like kids playing hide and seek.
I got AKs.
You guys got to draw them in.
Draw them in. They cannot see you. We have night vision.
They don't.
Turn the lights off now.
How much closer are we gonna let them get?
They got weapons.
Come on, we're on the right here.
We got about 25, 30 tangos. Taking the right side! Think you hit? You alright? Armor cut.
That's a mistake.
Dude, we kicked their asses. I don't know if I'm feeling lucky or unlucky. They thought they were walking into another temporary embassy.
Not here, brother.
Get us some
Tonto, you hear me?
Get us fucking something.
Your ass, check in.
All good, Boone, Tonto, building B.
D was out of the fight.
Tower 3. Take a knot. Never better. Listen, Joe. Stay down. Bad guy's house is still active, Ty. We got eyes on.
Roger that.
They shot out all the lights.
First wave got the job done. You want a coffee? I sure as hell do.
I guess the drone saw 30 guys shooting at us.